Chapter 1. The last sound Maine Guardsman Sergeant Thomas Kennedy heard was the whine of a mosquito. At least he thought it was the last sound, although what he thought and what actually occurred had little to do with each other. He raised his right hand to brush it away, conscious of the heat under his helmet, the dry, sweltering sweat that soaked his uniform. And now a mosquito. As his hand lifted, he saw a glint, just a fracture of light, and he glanced down at Private First Class Edmund Johnson, who happened to be changing the back rear tire of the team's Humvee. In that instant, many things did not make sense. What were they doing here in Afghanistan to begin with? How had he come all this way, from Bangor, Maine, to be standing beside a beached Humvee, beside a private named Johnson who had arrived at this point in time from Solon, Maine? And where, after all, had the flash of light come from? They were in a dry, featureless plain, and the mountains, arguably the most rugged mountains in the world, were too far away to provide a sniper with sufficient height. So how could there be a flash of light, gunfire, when all the world lay flat and even and empty? That's when it occurred to Sergeant Thomas Kennedy that a mosquito is not always a mosquito. Because he felt his hand shatter, the bones flying apart under his skin, his cheek exploding so that he tasted teeth and blood in the same instant. Oh, he thought. Just that. What they had feared, what they had all feared, had finally arrived. They were pinned down, and a mosquito is not a mosquito, and he turned and spread his arms, ridiculously like a crossing guard, and tried to protect Private Johnson. The second bullet went through his shoulder, and he only felt it spin him. It didn't hurt. It felt like a bird. Someone yelled at him to get down, but Johnson still kneeled behind him, completely exposed, and Sergeant Kennedy spread his arms to expand his protection, and he knew that was a bad idea. He hardly even knew Johnson. The kid had arrived a month and a half ago from basic, and he was supposed to be an excellent mechanic, a diesel engine mechanic for Freightliner, but taking a bullet for him was another matter. But Sergeant Kennedy was fourth-generation Maine, and it was part of his Yankee nature to use things up, so it made no sense to him to let two people get shot when one was already plugged. It would be like punching a hole in a second bucket when the first was already punched, and so when the third bullet hit him, in the right knee, he figured he was done for anyway. He kept standing, shielding Johnson. Strangely, Sergeant Kennedy knew, absolutely knew, that what he was doing would be called brave. And that was simply curious, because it didn't feel brave. It all felt stupid. And he thought of Margaret, the new baby, the dairy cows plodding quietly into their milking stations, and he wondered why the sniper couldn't see how the entire thing was absurd. Why were they shooting at each other? He had no idea what an Afghan wanted in this world, but he figured that most humans wanted to live a peaceful life, and so as he held out his arms to protect Johnson behind him, he could not imagine that the sniper would not cease. Couldn't the sniper put the situation together? They were just grunts, just stupid soldiers doing what they were told, and if the milk prices hadn't fallen through the floor, Sergeant Kennedy would still be on the sweet dairy farm in Maine watching his herd. But the farm had debt, and the military promised to help, and now here he was with a man shooting at him. Sergeant Kennedy held up his hand to tell the shooter to stop, but instead he felt the fourth bullet go into his shin. And then it became a perverse game. See if you can knock me down. Sergeant Kennedy was a big man. He had played center for Millinocket High School, all-county selection, and he had hands as strong as any man he had ever met. His strength was always a fact. He knew it existed inside him, in a deep, quiet place, and he had scuff-ups with stronger-looking kids, more muscled men, but Sergeant Kennedy had always come out on top. Maine strength, they called it down east. It came, he felt, from growing up on a farm, handling cattle, pushing and shoving the goofy bastards every single day of his life. He had lifted more calves than he could count, had engaged in wrestling matches with Holsteins, their war